Hi, this is Sandy with SDS Digital and the Accord Sequarallel. This video covers a way to use a Sequarallel as a CV recorder that can record 3 channels simultaneously and play up to 6 out to the panel jacks at once. Because the Sequarallel can convert CV to MIDI and MIDI to CV, recording the CV once it has been converted into a MIDI CC number, then playing the recording back through CV mode's MIDI CC to CV converter makes it a decent recorder. Different configurations can be set up, like 3 inputs to 4 outputs. This is good for recording multiple inputs at once, or 1 input to record and up to 6 outputs to play. This, of course, has its pros and cons when compared to a proper CV recorder. The pros are, very long recordings can be made, like the SDS RTM. Several recordings can be stored, well, up to 32 in a single song project, so it could be used for a bank for CV manipulations. The CV mode CC Smooth feature can be used to modify and smooth out slower CVs recorded. If the clock rate is important, the CVs recorded will follow the clock. The CV in to CV voltages are pretty close. Panel MIDI output can be disabled by using the link port alone. The cons are, the resolution is only MIDI clock ticks, so 24 samples per quarter note before smoothing. That said, the clock rate can be 1000 BPM, so not really an issue. Care must be taken with the loop point if a sudden voltage jump is not desired. While the layer loop step sequencer can be used to play different recordings, none of the step effects will change the output, although it can be used to switch the samples to other channels, thus different jacks. So we need to make a few settings for the Sequarallel to become a CV recorder, mainly in the MIDI push and CV mode. In CV mode, we need to set up the CC jacks. The source will be the link output, so the panel MIDI can be muted, stopping all CC data from streaming out. Using channel 2 keeps channel 1 free. The jacks function must be set to the MIDI CC number we'll be using for the CV input. 1 or 0. Let's go with CC 0. For what we'll be using this CV output with, an SDS VCO, it can't be bipolar. So with jack CC2, we'll do the same type of setup, but with MIDI CC number 1. The voltage range can also be changed if desired. Channel 2. MIDI CC number 1. Let's leave the rest for time's sake and set up the CV inputs in the MIDI push quick box. CC5 and CC6 jacks are input by default, so they must send a MIDI CC 0 and 1. On channel 2. As I mentioned earlier, disabling the panel MIDI output of channel 2 prevents that port from getting cluttered up with CC data. That is if it's not going to be used by a MIDI receiver. The CC5 and 6 jacks send to both panel MIDI and the link bus, but one has to remain active for CV mode to see them. Now for a minor change to settings. The CV inputs can't go directly to MIDI output, or the layers won't record them. It needs to be routed to merge with the MIDI input. That's a global setting, so once you're done with the recording and this kind of thing, it might be good to put it back as it uses lots more processor power. So the CV I/O is sorted out. Now let's do an audition to verify the CV to CV is working. I'll patch into the little LFO first, and CC5 input jack. There it is on the CC1 LED. And on the scope. Let's have a listen. Notice it is indeed unipolar, which the SDS VCO likes. Now CC6 input jack. Huh, it's not working. Okay, here's the problem. It must send on MIDI CC number 1, the way CV mode jack CC2 is configured. There, now it's good. Now we need to add a layer quick box to do the recordings. In the record settings, making it a one-shot makes life a lot easier when recording CV inputs, in any case. I also like to start with clock, which means it won't wait until a MIDI event to start recording. I don't think that'll be a problem though here, as there's tons of CC data coming in, but it's a preference. We'll record 8 bars, which won't take long at this clock rate, which is around 120 BPM, I think. Patch the LFO back over to CC5 jack. And hit play to start the record. With a faster clock rate, the recording will be much smoother, by the way. More MIDI ticks per second. It's important to unplug or turn down the input after, as it will conflict with the recording and make a real mess, as you can see. So here's the playback. It's a bit digital sounding with only 48 samples per second or so, but this offers the opportunity to use the CC smoothing feature. Oh yeah, it's the CC1 jack. That's better. Version 2.0 has one more smoothing level, the fastest being 10 now. Too much. So there, we have a nice CV recording going. Let's try another. CC6 jack is going to play through the CC2 jack. So this one will be the Ritm's velocity waveform I tapped in earlier, with an offset ramp. The LFO is plugged into the Ritm's CV input, which is why we're seeing it here. The cool thing is the recording can be anything, and be really long, plus sync to the clock. Also in the layer loop step sequencer, it can be re-triggered on bars, or skipped while others play. I'll set the record bars to only 2 this time. Hit play. Now remove the input to hear it. So let's do one more to output on CC3 jack. That needs to be configured, so we'll do that first. This one will be MIDI CC number 2. No smoothing, as it will be a pulsed clock from the Ritm. In MIDI push, I'll just change CC5 over to MIDI CC number 2. I'm attenuating it, so no need to unplug it after. This one will be 4 bars long, so I have time to sweep the attenuator. And record. This is what I meant by joining the loop. It's at 0 volts at that point. Smoothing makes it a bit chaotic, but would be better for a filter to avoid the clicks of sudden changes and such. So there we have it, 3 CV waveforms happily playing together. Keep in mind though that the more that are playing, the less bandwidth there will be on the internal MIDI stream, which self-adjusts to avoid overloading the stream. It's not noticeable here at all, and you have no effect on update rate of the smoothing feature. So I hope you have enjoyed this fun way to use the Sequarallel in your setup. Thanks for watching.